The bell above Jake's motorcycle repair shop chimed weakly as the door creaked open. He looked up from the Harley engine he was rebuilding, grease-stained hands pausing mid-motion. A teenage girl stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Her clothes were wrinkled, her brown hair tangled, and something about the way she held herself, arms wrapped protectively around her thin frame, made Jake's protective instincts flare. "We're closed," he said gently, wiping his hands on a rag. The girl didn't move. As his eyes adjusted, he could see the purple bruise blooming along her left cheek, the way she favored her right side when she breathed. Emma stepped into the shop, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal somehow comforting after the sterile coldness of her father's house. She'd been walking for hours, ever since she'd managed to pick the lock on the basement door while her father was at work. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club's shop had been the first place that looked like somewhere her father would never think to find her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the fluorescent lights. "I need help." Jake set down his tools completely, studying the girl's face. In his 15 years with the Iron Wolves, he'd seen enough victims to recognize the signs. The careful way she moved, the hypervigilance in her eyes, the bruises in various stages of healing. His jaw tightened. "What's your name, kid?" "Emma." She glanced toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. Emma Richardson. The name hit Jake like a physical blow. Richardson, as in Thomas Richardson, the city councilman who'd been pushing to shut down their clubhouse for months. The man who gave speeches about cleaning up the neighborhood and protecting families. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Emma sank into the folding chair Jake offered, her body finally allowing itself to feel the exhaustion that had been building for days. The motorcycle shop felt like a different world from her father's pristine house. Chaotic, but honest. Rough around the edges, but somehow safe. "When's the last time you ate?" Jake asked, pulling a protein bar from his desk drawer. Emma's stomach growled in response, betraying her. She accepted the food gratefully, tearing into the wrapper with shaking hands. The shop's back door opened, and 2 more bikers entered. Emma tensed, but Jake raised a calming hand. "Easy, Emma. These are my brothers, Marcus and Tony. They're good people." Marcus, a bear of a man with graying temples, took one look at Emma, and his expression darkened. Tony, younger and leaner, whistled low under his breath. "Someone's been using this kid as a punching bag," Marcus observed, his voice carefully controlled. Emma flinched at the blunt assessment, but didn't deny it. There was no point in lying. The evidence was written across her body in bruises and cuts. "My father," she said quietly. He gets angry when I don't follow his rules perfectly. When I question anything he says or does." "What kind of rules?" Jake asked, settling into a chair across from her. Emma's hands trembled as she set down the protein bar. "I'm not allowed to leave the house without permission. I can't have friends. I can't use the phone or computer unless he's watching. And when I break the rules," she touched the bruise on her cheek unconsciously. "Where's your mother?" Tony asked gently. "Dead. Car accident when I was 12. Emma's voice was flat, emotionless. That's when the rules started. The afternoon sun was fading when Emma finally found the courage to tell them about the basement. She'd been circling around it for hours, talking about the smaller punishments, the isolation, the constant fear. But the basement was different. The basement was where her father's true nature revealed itself. "He has this room," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Downstairs, behind the furnace. It looks like a normal storage room from the outside, but—" Jake leaned forward, every muscle in his body tense. "But what, Emma?" "There's a lock on the outside, heavy duty, and inside." She closed her eyes as if trying to block out the memory. "There's just a mattress on the floor, a bucket, nothing else." When I really disappoint him, when I try to fight back or tell someone what's happening, that's where I go. The silence in the shop was deafening. Marcus's hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Tony was staring at the floor, his jaw working furiously. "How long?" Jake asked, his voice deadly quiet. The longest was 6 days. No food for the first 3, just water. Emma opened her eyes, meeting Jake's gaze directly. "He tells everyone I'm sick when I'm down there. Homeschooled, so no one notices when I'm not around." "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. Emma continued, the words pouring out now like water through a broken dam. "He's running for mayor next year. His whole campaign is about family values and protecting children. The irony isn't lost on me." Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, normal people going about their normal lives, while a 16-year-old girl sat in his shop, describing years of systematic abuse. "You can't go back there," he said finally. "I don't have anywhere else to go. And if I disappear, he'll call the police. Tell them I was kidnapped by bikers." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Who do you think they'll believe?" That night, Emma slept on the couch in the shop's small office, while Jake sat guard in the main garage. He'd called his club president Dutch, who'd listened to the story with the kind of cold fury that meant someone was going to pay. "We can't just take her word for it," Dutch had said, though his tone suggested he believed every word. "Richardson's got connections. We need proof." Emma woke before dawn, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Through the office window, she could see Jake working on a motorcycle, his movements precise despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, stepping into the main shop. Jake looked up, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "Nightmares?" "Always." Emma perched on a nearby stool. "You don't have to do this, you know. Help me. I'm not your responsibility." "Kid, the moment you walked through that door, you became our responsibility." Jake set down his wrench. "That's how this works. We protect people who can't protect themselves." "Even from my own father?" "Especially from your own father." Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching Jake work. He wasn't always like this. After Mom died, he was just sad, distant. The anger came later. The control, it was gradual, like a slow poison. "Abuse usually is," Jake said. "Starts small, a raised voice here, a grabbed arm there. Before you know it, you're locked in a basement, wondering how your life got so twisted." "How do you know so much about it?" Jake's hands stilled on the motorcycle. "My old man was a mean drunk, beat my mother until she couldn't take it anymore. She left when I was 15. Took my little sister, but left me behind. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me something important. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to stand by you when everything goes to hell." By noon, the shop had filled with Iron Wolves members. Emma watched nervously as they arrived one by one. Dutch, the club president with his steel-grey eyes and commanding presence. Razor, the sergeant-at-arms whose scarred hands told stories of violence. Bear, the gentle giant who ran the club's legitimate businesses. And half a dozen others whose names she was still learning. They'd moved their discussion to the back office, but Emma could hear the low rumble of their voices through the thin walls. She caught fragments: surveillance, evidence, Richardson, and words that made her stomach clench with fear and hope in equal measure. "They're planning something," she said to Jake when he emerged from the meeting. "They're planning to keep you safe," he corrected. "But Dutch is right. We need more than your word against his. Richardson's got half the city council in his pocket." Emma nodded, understanding the impossible position they were in. "What if I went back, wore a wire or something?" "Absolutely not." Jake's response was immediate and firm. "You're not going back to that house, ever." "But if it's the only way to get proof..." "Emma." Dutch appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small space. We've been doing this a long time. Trust us to handle it our way." She studied the club president's face, seeing the same protective determination she'd noticed in Jake. These men, who society labeled as criminals and outcasts, were showing her more care and concern than her own father ever had. "What's your way?" she asked. Dutch smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the shop, Emma felt a flicker of hope. "Patience, kid, and when the time comes, overwhelming force." Thomas Richardson stood at the podium in the city council chambers, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a seasoned politician. The subject of today's meeting was community safety, and he was in his element. "We must ask ourselves," he said, gesturing toward the small crowd of constituents, "what kind of message we're sending to our children when we allow criminal organizations to operate openly in our neighborhoods." Several heads nodded in agreement. Richardson had been building support for months, painting the Iron Wolves as a menace to decent society. The irony wasn't lost on the 3 club members sitting in the back row, watching him perform. "These motorcycle clubs bring drugs, violence, and corruption wherever they go," Richardson continued. "As your next mayor, I promise to clean up our streets and make our community safe for families again." Bear shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Guy's got some balls," he muttered to Razor. "Wait for it," Razor replied, his eyes never leaving Richardson's face. "I speak as a father myself," Richardson said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. "My daughter, Emma, is the light of my life. Everything I do, every decision I make, is with her future in mind. That's what drives me, the desire to build a world where our children can grow up without fear." The applause was enthusiastic. Richardson basked in it for a moment before continuing his speech about family values and community protection. In the back row, 3 bikers exchanged dark looks, each thinking about the 16-year-old girl currently hiding in their clubhouse, too terrified to show her face in public. After the meeting, they watched Richardson work the crowd, shaking hands and accepting praise for his passionate speech about protecting children. He was good at this, they had to admit, convincing, charismatic, the kind of man people wanted to believe in. "No wonder no one's ever questioned what goes on in his house," Bear said as they walked to their bikes. "He's got the whole town convinced he's Father of the Year." Emma had been with the Iron Wolves for 3 days when her father made his first public move. The local news ran a story about a missing teenager, complete with Richardson's tearful plea for his daughter's safe return. "Emma is everything to me," he said into the camera, his eyes red-rimmed with what appeared to be genuine grief. "She's been struggling since her mother's death, and I'm worried she may have fallen in with the wrong crowd. If anyone has seen her, please contact the police immediately." Emma watched the broadcast from the clubhouse, her hands shaking as her father painted her as a troubled runaway. The reporter mentioned her history of behavioral issues and rebellion against authority, all carefully crafted lies that would make any future accusations seem like the desperate fantasies of a disturbed teenager. "He's good," Dutch observed grimly. "Really good." "He's had years of practice," Emma replied, her voice hollow. "Whenever I tried to tell a teacher or counselor what was happening, he'd already laid the groundwork. Poor Thomas Richardson, struggling to raise a difficult daughter alone. They always believed him." Jake sat beside her on the couch, close enough to offer comfort, but careful not to crowd her. "We're going to need that evidence sooner rather than later. He's forcing our hand." "The basement," Emma said suddenly. "There might be things down there, evidence of what he's done." "What kind of things?" Emma's face went pale. "Sometimes he takes pictures when I'm at my worst. Bruised, crying, begging. He says it's to remind me of what happens when I disappoint him, but I think he enjoys it." The room fell silent except for the low growl that emanated from Razor's throat. Dutch placed a restraining hand on his sergeant-at-arms' shoulder. "Where does he keep these pictures?" Dutch asked, his voice carefully controlled. "There's a safe in his study, behind the family portrait." Emma met his eyes. "I know the combination. He made me watch him open it once, said it was so I'd know where he kept the evidence of my problems in case I ever thought about running away." The Iron Wolves spent the next day planning their move with military precision. Dutch had connections throughout the city. Former military, ex-cops, people who owed favors or shared their sense of justice. By evening, they had a plan that would either save Emma or destroy them all. "Richardson's speaking at the Rotary Club tomorrow night," Bear reported. 7 to 9 p.m. Big fundraiser for his mayoral campaign. "Security?" Dutch asked. "Minimal. 2 off-duty cops, but they'll be focused on the crowd, not his house." Emma listened to the details with growing anxiety. "You're talking about breaking into his house. That's a felony. If you get caught..." "If we get caught, we're screwed anyway," Jake said bluntly. "Your father's already painted us as the bad guys. Might as well earn the reputation." "But what if the pictures aren't there? What if he moved them?" Dutch leaned forward, his expression serious. "Emma, I need you to understand something. We're not just doing this for evidence. We're doing this because it's right. Even if we don't find anything, at least we'll know we tried. And if we do find something, then your father's going to learn what happens when you hurt children in our territory." The weight of their commitment settled over Emma like a blanket. These men, who barely knew her, were willing to risk everything to help her. It was more than her own father had ever done. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The basement door. It's reinforced steel with a deadbolt lock, but there's a key hidden in his study, top drawer of his desk taped to the underside." "Why are you telling us this?" Razor asked. Emma met his gaze steadily. "Because I want him to know what it feels like to be trapped." The Richardson house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, its manicured lawn and perfect exterior hiding the horrors within. Jake and Marcus approached from the back, while Dutch and Razor took the front. Emma waited in the van with Bear, her heart pounding as she watched her childhood home through the tinted windows. "Motion sensors on the back door," Jake's voice crackled through their earpieces. "But the basement window on the east side is clear." Emma closed her eyes, remembering the countless times she'd stared out that same window from the inside, dreaming of escape. "The window latch is broken," she whispered into her microphone. "Has been for months. He never bothered to fix it because he never thought I'd be brave enough to try." "We're in," Marcus reported a few minutes later. Emma guided them through the house via radio, her voice steady despite the memories each room evoked. The living room, where her father entertained his political allies. The kitchen, where she'd learned to cook his meals exactly to his specifications. The hallway, lined with family photos that told the story of a loving father and his devoted daughter. "Studies on the second floor," she directed. "Third door on the right. The safe is behind the portrait of our family, the one where I'm smiling." She remembered that photo session. She'd been 14, still hoping that things might get better between them. Her father had insisted on dozens of takes until her smile looked natural enough to fool the camera. "Got it," Dutch's voice came through clearly. "Jesus Christ, Emma, there's got to be hundreds of photos in here." Emma's stomach lurched. She'd known about the pictures, but hearing the scope of his collection made it real in a way that terrified her. "The key to the basement should be in the desk drawer," she managed to say. "Found it. We're heading down." The next few minutes felt like hours. Emma could hear their footsteps through the radio, the creak of the basement stairs she knew so well. Then silence. "Emma," Jake's voice was tight with controlled rage, "we found it, all of it." The basement room was exactly as Emma had described it, a concrete box with a mattress, a bucket, and nothing else. But it was the walls, that told the real story. Scratches in the concrete where fingernails had clawed desperately, dark stains that could only be blood. And in one corner, barely visible, words carved into the stone. "Emma Richardson was here. Someone please help me." Jake photographed everything while Marcus gathered physical evidence. The room was a monument to systematic abuse, a torture chamber hidden beneath the facade of suburban respectability. "There's more," Dutch reported from upstairs. "Computer files, financial records. This sick bastard's been documenting everything." The safe had contained not just photographs, but detailed journals describing Emma's punishments, her reactions, her attempts at resistance. Richardson had turned his daughter's suffering into a twisted hobby, cataloguing each broken rule and its consequences with clinical precision. "We need to go." Bear's voice cut through their investigation. "Neighbor's dog is barking. Someone might come to check." They gathered what they could carry and retreated to the van, leaving the house exactly as they'd found it. Emma sat in stunned silence as they drove away, processing the fact that her nightmare was finally documented, finally real in a way that others could see and understand. "What happens now?" she asked. Dutch turned from the front seat, his expression grim but determined. "Now we make sure your father never hurts another child again. The police. The police are just the beginning," Jake said. "Your father's about to learn that some justice doesn't come from courtrooms." Emma nodded, understanding the implication. The Iron Wolves had their own code, their own way of dealing with people who hurt the innocent. For the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. "He's going to know it was me," she said. "When you turn over the evidence, he'll know I led you to it." "Good," Razor growled from the driver's seat. "Let him know. Let him spend the rest of his miserable life looking over his shoulder, wondering when we're coming for him." The evidence hit the police department like a bomb. Detective Sarah Martinez, who'd been assigned to Emma's missing person case, stared at the photographs and documents spread across her desk with growing horror and rage. "Where did you get this?" she asked Dutch, though her tone suggested she didn't really want to know. "Does it matter?" Dutch replied. "What matters is that it's real. Every photo, every document, every piece of evidence in that room." Martinez had been a cop for 15 years, had seen the worst humanity had to offer, but the systematic nature of Richardson's abuse, the clinical way he documented his daughter's suffering, made her stomach turn. "This is enough to put him away for life," she said finally. "If it makes it to trial," Dutch pointed out, "Richardson's got friends in high places, judges, prosecutors, city officials. You really think they're going to let their golden boy go down for this?" Martinez looked up sharply. "Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Emma Richardson has been crying for help for years, and every adult who should have protected her failed. We're not going to let that happen again." The detective studied Dutch's face, seeing the cold determination there. She'd heard rumors about the Iron Wolves, their reputation for protecting their own and punishing those who crossed them. Looking at the evidence of what Richardson had done to his own daughter, she found herself hoping those rumors were true. "I'll do everything by the book," she said finally. "But if the system fails that girl again—" "It won't," Dutch assured her. "One way or another, Thomas Richardson is going to pay for what he's done." Meanwhile, across town, Richardson was finishing his speech to the Rotary Club, accepting congratulations on his passionate advocacy for children's safety. He had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him. Thomas Richardson was in his study, reviewing poll numbers for his mayoral campaign, when the police arrived. Through his window, he watched Detective Martinez and 4 uniformed officers approach his front door, their expressions grim and purposeful. His first thought was of Emma. Had they found her? Was she hurt? For a brief moment, genuine parental concern flickered across his features before being replaced by cold calculation. "Mr. Richardson?" Martinez showed her badge when he answered the door. We need to talk. Of course. Is this about Emma? Have you found her? In a manner of speaking. Martinez stepped into the foyer, her eyes taking in the family photos that lined the walls. Thomas Richardson, you're under arrest for child abuse, false imprisonment, and endangerment of a minor. The blood drained from Richardson's face. I don't understand. There must be some mistake. No mistake. Martinez nodded to the uniformed officers who moved to flank Richardson. We have extensive evidence of your systematic abuse of your daughter Emma, including photographs, documents, and physical evidence from the basement room where you imprisoned her. Richardson's political instincts kicked in. This is ridiculous. Emma is a troubled girl who's been acting out since her mother's death. If she's told you some story... She didn't tell us anything, Martinez interrupted. The evidence speaks for itself. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Richardson's mind raced. How had they found the evidence? Who had been in his house? His eyes fell on a family photo, Emma at age 14 smiling for the camera, and understanding dawned. The bikers, he breathed. Those animals broke into my house. I don't know what you're talking about, Martinez said, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care how the evidence had been obtained. You have the right to remain silent. As they led him away, Richardson caught sight of motorcycles parked across the street. 3 Iron Wolves members sat watching his arrest, their faces impassive, but their presence unmistakable. It was a message. They were watching, and they would continue to watch. The trial of Thomas Richardson became the biggest story in the city's recent history. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, journals, physical evidence from the basement room, and finally, Emma's own testimony. The girl who had once been too terrified to speak now stood in court and told her story with quiet strength. He used to tell me that no one would believe me, she said from the witness stand, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. He said I was just a troubled teenager, making up stories for attention, but the truth has a way of coming out, doesn't it? Richardson's defense team tried everything. Character witnesses, claims of mental illness, attempts to discredit the evidence. But the photos and documents were too damning, Emma's testimony too compelling. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. As the judge sentenced Richardson to 25 years to life, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd been carrying for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Outside the courthouse, the Iron Wolves waited. They'd attended every day of the trial, a silent show of support that hadn't gone unnoticed by the media or the community. Public opinion about the motorcycle club had shifted dramatically once Emma's story became known. What happens now? Emma asked Jake as they walked toward the bikes. Now you get to decide, he replied. You're 18 in 2 years. Until then, you've got a family that'll make sure you're safe and loved. Emma looked around at the men who had risked everything to save her. Dutch with his quiet authority, Marcus with his gentle strength, Razor with his fierce protectiveness, and Jake, who had become the father figure she'd never had. Family, she repeated, testing the word. It felt different now, not defined by blood or obligation, but by choice and love. That's right, Dutch said, joining them. Iron Wolves take care of their own, and you're one of us now, whether you wear the patch or not. 6 months later, Emma stood in the doorway of Jake's motorcycle shop, watching him work on a vintage Harley. The space that had once been her sanctuary had become her second home, filled with the sounds of engines and the easy camaraderie of the Iron Wolves. She was different now, stronger, more confident, no longer the terrified girl who had stumbled through their door seeking help. Therapy had helped, as had the unwavering support of her chosen family. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were growing less frequent. You ready for this? Jake asked, looking up from the engine he was rebuilding. Emma nodded, adjusting the leather jacket that bore the Iron Wolves support patch. Today was her first day at the community college, where she'd enrolled in social work classes. She wanted to help other kids like herself, to be the voice that she'd needed when she was trapped in her father's house. "Remember what we talked about," Jake said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You don't owe anyone your story. You tell what you want to tell, when you want to tell it." "I know." Emma smiled, the expression coming easier now than it had in years. "But I'm not ashamed anymore. What happened to me wasn't my fault, and hiding from it won't help anyone." Dutch appeared from the back office carrying a manila envelope. "This came for you," he said, handing it to Emma. She opened it to find a letter from another teenage girl, someone who had seen her story on the news and found the courage to speak up about her own situation. It wasn't the first such letter Emma had received, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. "There's a meeting tonight," Dutch said. "Child Services wants to consult with us on some cases. Seems our reputation for protecting kids has spread." Emma nodded, understanding the significance. The Iron Wolves were being recognized not as criminals, but as protectors, their willingness to stand up for the innocent earning them respect from unexpected quarters. As she prepared to leave for school, Emma paused at the shop's entrance, looking back at the men who had saved her life. They were working on their bikes, talking and laughing, going about their daily business. But she knew that if another scared child walked through that door, they would drop everything to help. "Thank you," she said quietly, though she knew the words could never fully express what they meant to her. Jake looked up and smiled. "That's what family does, kid. We protect each other." Emma walked out into the sunshine, her head held high, ready to face whatever came next. Behind her, the Iron Wolves continued their work, guardians watching over their community, ready to ride out in full force whenever justice called. The basement door that had once imprisoned her was now evidence in a storage facility, a reminder of evil defeated. But more importantly, it was a symbol of survival, of the strength that could be found when good people refused to look the away. Emma Richardson was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a member of a family that would never let her fall again.